So welcome everyone. I think that we should start, right? We are really thankful for you to be able to join our webinar today, which is the last one in the series of 3 webinars where we have been introducing our first cohort of the GLO Virtual Young Scholar Program to our community. The recordings from our first and second webinars are available from the GLO VirtYS page. So if you're interested, please have a look. And if you want to share with your contacts, please feel free. For those of you who have joined us for the first time, the GLO VirtYS program was established last year, and we have had 7 scholars who worked on their proposed research papers within the 3 GLO clusters. Today's webinar brings together 2 young scholars, Dr. Zhiling Wang from the Netherlands and Dr. Ömer Tuğsal Doruk from Turkey. Both of their projects have been, which we will hear about today, have benefited from the advice from Professor Francesco Pastore from the University of Campania in Italy. Before I introduce our 2 speakers, I would like to cover some housekeeping rules. So today's webinar will be recorded, or is it already being recorded, Matlub?
Already being recorded.
Okay, it's already being recorded in case this may affect your decision to turn on video or do different things. We will be able to share the link with you after the event, maybe in a couple of days, and we welcome you to revisit the content yourself or share with colleagues. Each presentation will take 15 minutes and then will be followed by 10 minutes discussion. Given the time restrictions, I would encourage you to save your questions to after the presentation, or maybe type it in the chat, and so we in question and answer chat box, so we can get back to them so you don't forget. I will keep the timing and try to signal in some way to the presenters if we are going too much over. I'll probably come in with the voice to let the speakers know. So without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker. Zhiling Wang is an assistant professor at the Erasmus University of Rotterdam and a GLO fellow. Today, she will talk to us about her GLO VirtYS project, where she investigated how the international study programs affect native students. The screen is yours, Zhiling, please.
Thank you very much, Elena. I thought it's a 20 minutes presentation, so just stop me when I'm running over too much, and I'll try to speed up. So hello, everyone. Welcome to my presentation. Today's working paper is "Do International Study Programs Pay Off for Native Students?" And it's a joint work with my GLO supervisor, Francesco Pastore, and 2 other colleagues. What you can, wait, I cannot change my... So what you can see is that the growth of this globalization of higher education really take off in recent years, and maybe even actually it took place already earlier. So in Europe, we see the total number of English taught bachelor programs. It has a very around 500 in the middle of 2009, and it really increases to 5 or 6 times by the time that is recorded in 2017. So there are multiple reasons for this. One is, of course, that European countries realize the necessity to standardize its credit. So it makes these courses more likely to be in English, so that students can exchange credits and they can move freely between universities. And there's also another reason, is that after global financial crisis, all countries need to boost their financial incomes in the revenues for education. So they also opened up a lot of English taught programs to attract students and also have them paying the tuition fees. So there's a huge debate on these international programs, that although we see a lot of positive benefits, because first of all, they contribute to tuition fees, and also they make the educational environment much more international than before. And also because of the inflow of foreign students, they contribute substantially to the regional level cultural diversity. But there's also an ongoing criticism on this, is that usually these international students, they are worried that they would crowd out the enrollment chances for native students. And of course, a further concern is that on the future job labor market, they are also compete with them. And so it's a general concerns that people have on foreign students, on native students. And there's another aspect of concern is coming from this erosion of local language identity, because they think in their own country, not enough teachers are qualified to really teach English well. And also it will make the students less capable of mastering their own local language. So both these supporters and opponents base their positions on conjectures rather than empirical evidence, because even until today, we haven't seen very scholarly evidences that really investigating the detailed benefits and disadvantage of these programs. So if you look at the news in recent years, there are different countries are taking different actions. For example, in 2018, Danish government started to cut their English programs. And their reason is just that these students are not contributing enough to this tuition fee, and they don't stay on the labor market, so they are not contributing to the taxes. And in 2019, the Netherlands also started to dumping degrees in English, but their reason is different. They just say they want to have students to join Dutch programs instead of English programs for native students. But if you look at France, they actually plan to boost this English taught programs to a great extent. And this is the country they want to increase international student numbers. So you see that there are contrasting actions taking place in different countries. So our research question for this paper is that what is the real impact of attending international study programs for these native graduates, and how do they perform on their labor market once they graduated from these programs? Because I think it will provide a good insight for policymakers whether they should introduce more of these programs or cut these programs. So our novelty of this paper has 3 dimensions. So first is that because we have administrative data sets, so we are able to investigate the impacts both in the short run and in the long run. And secondly, as we have detailed information on the records, we can better tackle the heterogeneity of these returns. And thirdly, we further investigate what are the mechanisms of these wage premiums that I will elaborate later. So the contribution to the strands of literature is, first of all, previous papers on globalization of higher education were heavily focused on enrollment, but not pretty much on the native graduates' labor market outcomes. And second of all, although there are a lot of papers talking about the beneficial impact of high-skilled immigration, but these benefit from the social interaction, knowledge transfer takes place in workplace, but not in the study place before you actually go on to a job market. And the last 2 is the benefit you can have from having foreign peers in your study environment. One is, of course, native graduates have better English proficiency. And secondly, because you are exposed to this more culturally diversified environment, so that will bring to some future benefits. In case that I'm running over time, so let me present you our preliminary results for this paper at this moment. So we found that students who graduated from international programs, starting from their first calendar year after graduation, they obtain a wage premium of 2.3% compared to those peers from attending a domestic program. And we see that this wage premium keeps growing every year. It grows at a pretty steady rate, about 1% increase every year. And when talking about heterogeneity, these benefits were pronounced in non-STEM majors and also students from low-ranked universities and those who end up in smaller cities for their first job. For mechanisms, what we found is that this wage premium is largely driven by their first choice of the first job. And the initial wage advantage goes with them in all later years of work. And I'll show you more tables later. For the data sources, we use this administrative data set from Statistics Netherlands, and we have detailed information on all students' records, educational or family or job history. We restrict our analysis period between 2006 to 2014, and it's all master students who graduated from a Dutch university. So it's not bachelor, because the globalization of bachelor takes place later, and also because a lot of bachelor students, they will go first to master program and then to job. So there might be a lot of confounding factors. That's why in the end, we choose master students who most likely will directly go to the job markets. And they are all native graduates. Both of their parents are Dutch. This is just to give you a bit of classification of the study fields that we have. We have 10 broad fields with the detailed narrow fields and the third, even more disaggregate level of fields. So the design of this identification is that under each detailed category of fields, we do see that some detailed fields have some international programs, while others are domestic programs. So in this case, we think that these attending international programs are treated individuals versus those who attended domestic programs. They are control individuals. And this figure, these two figures just give you a bit of a feeling that how the globalization of higher education is in the Netherlands for different categories of broad field. So you can see that it has a steady increase, both in terms of and share. And if you look at the dependent variable, that is a wage level we are interested, you see that for a student, the dot here just plots the average yearly starting wage. So you can see that already in the first job, the unconditional difference, you have a stable wage premium. And this is about 10, 11% of the wage level. And when we see the wage growth, so here we plot for different cohorts, when we calculate the wage premium before a student who attends international program versus a domestic program, you see that this wage premium also keeps growing over the years of work. So these different colors just represent people who graduated from different cohorts. But in general, you see that there's a starting wage premium level, and then it goes up with the years passes by. So the identification method we use in this paper is Coarsened exact matching, because an obvious concern is that people are worried that students attending an international program is a better cohort because they already fully proficient in English, and then they make this strategic decision just because they are better. If that is the case, this will introduce substantial self-selection and omitted variable bias here in our regression. So we go for this Coarsened exact matching, and we select these variables to control how comparable these students are. So we restrict them very strictly in the same gender, in the same cohort, in the same detailed field of study at the same university. And also we control for their previous exposure in cultural diversity and their parents' income level. So here it's proxied by the fathers. So the main idea of Coarsened exact matching is that it creates different cells or different bins, and you assign students to different bins. And in the end, once a treated student is matched with some control students, and this bin is exactly the small room we're going to compare them. So this will lose a lot of individuals because you cannot find, not all these treated students can find a comparable peers. And also there are a lot of students who are not matched. So using this one-to-match method, we in the end have around 16,000 graduates and 78,000 observations, because we can observe them for more years. On average here, we control up until 5. And this will give us about 28% of the full sample. Our identification strategy is very straightforward. On the left-hand side, it's a log of wage of individual at the same program P, cohort C, and measured in T. So here we interact whether you attended an international program with the dummies standing for how many years after graduation. So we make it 1 year, 2 years, up until 5 years after graduation. And the most important thing is, since we have this Coarsened exact matching, so this phi m already controls for all these potential confounding factors, and this is a matched being fixed effects. And I have to say this is a very, very strict restriction in this identification. So about the baseline results, the first column is the one that it's the most preferred specification. So here we see that when you're attending international programs, 1 year since graduation, you have a starting wage premium of 2.3, and this goes up and up until here about 5.9, about 6 at the 5 years since graduation. And in the first column, we actually only take the sample that is 1-to-n matched. So that means 1 treated students matched and control students. And we control for these fixed effects, and especially this match being fixed effects. And in the second and third column, we gradually loosen this restriction. So first of all, we throw away this match being fixed effects. And you can see that the wage premium clearly goes up. And in the third column, we even loosen it further, is that we go for the full sample. Then we have more observations, but what you can see is here, these numbers cannot tell us the real impact because it's just the unconditional difference. And this is the result that when you are not controlling for the self-selection issue. And these 3 columns were just, we're playing with a different combination of fixed effects because these are supposed to be driven by your choice, of course, because by attending international universities, you might be more likely to sort into and having the strictest control fixed effects, we still see that the wage premium persists. And the last column is just 1-to-1 matched. So here we have even smaller sample size because we say that one student is only allowed to be matched to another one control students.
Zhiling, sorry, it's 2 minutes. I tried to signal other way, but it didn't work. So
okay.
please continue.
Okay, I'll try to speed up and skip some slides. So for the heterogeneity, we don't see much on the gender, but we do see non-STEM has this pattern, and universities with lower rankings have this pattern, and graduates who work in smaller cities have this pattern. So it's basically because, for example, in the Netherlands, Amsterdam is already international enough. So the benefit of attending international programs might be more pronounced in smaller cities where you do have this better English proficiency and the social skills. For mechanisms, so as I said, we checked 3 hypotheses. One is, do these students got substantially different jobs at the first firm? So what we can see is that for their first job, international program students are more likely to go to bigger firm and having fixed contract, and it's more international, and firms are more likely to do trade. So this clearly points to the fact that these firms are better than those who attended domestic programs. And the second hypothesis we test is that whether students from international programs are more likely to switch firms, because when you switch firms, you always have a higher bargaining power, so that will brings you a wage premium. So we checked that the total number of firms in different years interval, we didn't find anything. So that means the wage premium is not driven by their more frequent mobility across firms. And thirdly, we check whether these students are more likely to get promotion within the same firm. So what we do, for example, in the first 2 columns, when we control for the first firm fixed effects, this wage premium actually dies out. But if we don't control for it, this is still here. And this is the same for all these years interval, basically meaning that the first choice of the job is important, and that initial wage advantage persists you in all the job later, but in all these years of experience later. Okay, I'll skip this too. So the last page, to wrap up, we investigate the wage premium from attending international study programs in a non-English speaking context. I think this is pretty new. The main takeaway of this presentation is that these international programs really endow native students a head start in the career, and this advantage will persist in all years. The policy implications, I think there are at least 3 directions we can think of. Nowadays, we have seen frequently on the news that escalating restrictions to foreign students in the United States. And maybe that's a chance for Europe later to attract more of these international students to Europe and deal with the labor shortage problem. And second direction is definitely having these results. I think it points to the fact that Europe should encourage the proliferation of English programs. And thirdly is about accompanying these results. I think another direction is that the government should also think about the policies retaining high-skilled foreign graduates, especially after they finish their study, because that will contribute to more this peer interaction on the workplace. Okay, thank you all. Yeah, this is the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much. Maybe you could stop sharing the screen so we can see everyone in an easier way. Thank you very much, Zhiling. Very interesting. We don't have any questions in the chat, but if you would like to ask, just go ahead and ask, as in, yes, please, Klaus.
Yeah, very interesting presentation. Thank you very much. Now, the issue I have is, maybe I haven't understood it completely, the intensity of the international program. Does this play a role, how international it's really? So if a Dutch student goes to Germany across the border, it might not help so much. And the other issue is this somehow related with the field I'm studying? So it must be maybe in one field more important than in another.
Sorry, Klaus, if I understand correctly, you're asking the process of this internationalization of the programs.
No, I understand internationalization means you are in this program, 1.0, a dummy, yes? Is this how I understand it?
Yeah.
But you could also think about intensity. I mean, how international is an international program? Depends. So see, if I'm a Dutch student and I go to China, that's different than I go to Germany or France.
I see. Yeah, that can be something done, because here we used whether you have English track, so it can only give us 1.0 dummy. But I think what we can further explore is the composition of the students, because even one program provides English, you could check like what is the background of those foreign students attending these programs.
And the other issue was field. Are these? I mean, is it the same for economics or, let's say, English or whatever? I mean, if it's teacher, is this different from another field of study?
Yeah, that could be. At least from the basic summary statistics, we see this ICT increases a lot, and also e-com and social science. Okay. So yeah, and for example, other education and agriculture, they don't change much, but there's definitely some heterogeneity there.
Okay, so Brussels will be happy about the results.
Thank you. More questions? Please, Almas.
Okay. Thank you for your very interesting presentation. My question is, your sample is 2006 to 2014, and we had this global economic crisis in the between, and that will influence willingness or propensity to study, say, international, and also it influences the wages. Your graphs didn't show clear difference between different cohorts wage development. Did you find any effect from this crisis? Because some of the students would have not studied if it was not because of the crisis. So their quality must be lower. At the same time, those who lose job and go back to education, they have experience which influences their wage level and development.
Yeah, thank you very much for this very good suggestions. Let me share my screen again, because I remember there is one graph that might answer this question. Okay. So if you look at this one, this is the starting wage level. You do see that in 2006 to up until 2009, it's still increasing, and while there's a dip. after that. And then it's until 2012 and 2013, it goes to bounce back. So, so I think—
Did you control for it in your regressions or not?
The year dummies are already controlled, but what I did, but what I did as an additional robustness checks is that I shrink the regression to only post-financial crisis. And what you can see is that the results are still there.
Thank you.
But yes, but I think the point on those students who already have some working experience and they are forced to do study, I think that's an interesting dimension that I can explore later.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? While you're thinking, can I ask one? I wonder, at those international programs, you mentioned in the motivation that people are concerned about Dutch cultural identity being dissolved, or if I remember your wording correctly, but is there a requirement for international students to learn Dutch within certain, because for example, in Ukraine, when international students come, they are taught in English, but at the beginning, but then they are supposed to learn Ukrainian within first year or couple of years.
Yeah, there's no such a requirement, but what I know is that for some programs, it's taught in Dutch. So then for foreign students who want to participate in these programs, they have to learn 1 year language. But that's not the one we're talking.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Elsa, would you like to ask your question yourself? There is a question from Elsa.
Oh, I see that. Yeah, in the chat box.
Yeah, did you control by the language or language group?
You mean the language group of the students, the home language? No, actually, but I do have their nationality. I do have the information where they are coming from. But since this paper is on native graduates' labor performance, so I'm not sure how I can add this dimension. Yeah, but I understand your point, because if this paper is about foreign students' labor market performance, of course you can always check which group of students with certain language will benefit the most.
But that would be interesting to address what Klaus raised, right? Kind of measuring the diversity of the program.
Yeah.
To use this information. But that's kind of maybe other contribution later on.
Yeah, that can always be added because this information is available.
Yeah. Well, if there are no other questions, thank you very much, Zhiling. Let us proceed. So I would like to invite Ömer Doruk from Adana Technology University, and a GLO fellow as well. His GLO VirtYS project focused on the school to work transitions and macroeconomic conditions in the Turkish economy. And we are eager to hear about your findings, Ömer. Please, the screen is yours.
Okay, let me share my screen first. Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk about the effects of macroeconomic conditions on the school to work transition in a developing country, an important developing country, which is the Turkish economy. In the present study, we examined the school to work transition in Turkey over the period of 2014 and 2017 by using a monthly data set. As most emerging markets economies, the Turkish one faced a set of different macroeconomic conditions. Moreover, the duration of transition from school to work is longer than that in other more developed economies. And also, I want to emphasize that finding a job during a period of different macroeconomic conditions is a very hard task for young graduates. And therefore, we use advanced panel data models to understand the effects of macroeconomic conditions on the skill-to-work transitions in the given period. Our empirical analysis is based on longitudinal data sets, which covers more than 1,000 individuals who have at least 12 months of observation. And the data set contains observation covering more than 24 months for some individuals. And it is therefore very useful to cover the sample period to understand the effects of business cycles on the skill-to-work transition in developing in Turkish economy. And moreover, in the current literature, there are no data sets able to cover such a long period of the time of the skill-to-work transition period in other MENA countries. In the current literature, the work of Manacorda in 2017 showed that the average time to find a job for young graduates is around 3.4 months in Asia-Pacific areas and 24.5 months in the MENA countries, okay, which is a very useful data set to understand the main mechanism between the macroeconomic dynamics and the skill-to-work transition in the Turkish economy. And the minimum wage for individuals in my data set in our data set is 16, the maximum is 39, and the mean age is 22. In the current literature, schooling has a special place in the literature. We know a very famous paper of Becker puts that schooling and formal training may enhance the productivity capacity of individuals in terms of human capital. And also there has been a number of papers that examine the school-to-work transition in developed countries. And also for developing countries, there are micro and macro aspects that may have an influence on the school-to-work transition. In the micro side, gender disparity, and educational quality, the role of social network have been emphasized. In macro side, institutional settings, labor market policies, income distribution play an important role for the school-to-work transition process in the current literature. On the as Francesco, in his very famous works, highlights, the youth labor market is the most sensitive to the business cycle due to the so-called last in, first out principle. Let me explain a little bit this principle. Young people incorporate less job-specific human capital. Second, they often do not have family, and therefore the cost of firing young people will be lower in terms of social cost. And also, in the current literature, Kahn finds that graduating from college in a bad economy has a long-run negative impacts on wages and also the school-to-work transition. I mean that the effect of business cycle has a negative effect. Is a negative on the school-to-work transition, even if we are talking about developed countries, because the Kahn's study covers the U.S. economy during the business cycle, especially during the 2008 financial crisis and the post-crisis period. Another dimension of the current literature is also about the youth experience gap, which is emphasized also Francesco and his colleagues. And the authors emphasize that youth experience gap is the gap between young and adult workers, since the productivity of adult workers is greater than that of young workers, because the competencies that the firms needs cannot be acquired in the classroom, and there is a significant gap between the adult workers and the young workers in terms of their competencies. Therefore, we define that the youth experience gap is also another an important dimension in the current literature for the school-to-work transition. And also, in the current literature, there is a significant gap for the school-to-work transition in developing countries, especially in the MENA area. And in this area, macroeconomic imbalances, let's say financial crisis, Arab uprising, has been researched by the authors, but there is no significant study which emphasize the role of business cycle on the school-to-work transition. All in all, in the current literature show that macroeconomic conditions have a significant effect on the school-to-work transition. and the MENA countries. In this setting, we try to fill a significant gap in the current literature on the relationship between business cycle and skilled work transition. And therefore, our study provides manifold additions to the current literature. First, we use time variant monthly information on the transition of young graduates. Our data sets provides time variant monthly information. And such data sets are rarely used in the current literature because most of the studies in the current literature based on yearly data sets. And second, we also use time varying difference and difference fixed effect panel OLS model to examine the dynamics of the boom periods, which are occasionally seen in developing economies, on the skilled work transition periods. We try to build and we try to establish a link between the boom periods and the skilled work transition for the Turkish economy. Third, we use monthly average real wage for each young graduate who complete his or her transition to a job. And also we use variable hazard model to examine the effects of boom periods on the exit to a job of the skilled work transition. Lastly, we try to assess the effects of a number of macroeconomic variables, such as a monthly industrial production, real sector confidence, interest rates, real effective exchange rates, and the credit expansion periods. Thanks to our monthly data set, we try to examine the linkage between those macroeconomic variables and the skilled work transition in Turkish economy. Therefore, our hypothesis, our main hypothesis is that macroeconomic variables can have an important and significant effect on the skilled work transition in the Turkish economy. Our first hypothesis is that the industrial production index shortens the skilled work transition. We use the industrial production index, of which base year is 2005 for the Turkish economy, and which is the monthly indicator, and also is a good proxy of monthly economic performance in the Turkish economy. And our second hypothesis is that the real sector confidence index also shortens the skilled work transition in Turkish economy. Our real sector business confidence index for Turkey, which is based is 2007 January, and is based on some questionnaire, some questionnaires which were conducted by the Central Bank of Turkey, which the survey consists of the current situation of the business sector, as well as on expectations for the next 3 months. The real sector confidence index is therefore constructed by the central bank according to those questions about the current production, current employment decisions, and also next 3 months period outcomes or expectations about the business sector in the Turkish economy. Another side hypothesis, real exchange rate, shortens the skilled work transition. Real exchange rate is a good indicator of international competitiveness, especially for the emerging markets, because when you try to lower inflation rate with an increasing nominal exchange rate, this devaluing exchange rate triggers the export boom for the economy. Okay? Therefore, we also construct a link between the real exchange rate and skilled work transition, and we expect that the correlation is positive between the real exchange rate and the skilled work transition in the Turkish economy. And another and last sub-hypothesis is that real exchange rate, which shows the cost of debt for the business firms in the Turkish economy, has a negative effect on the skilled work transition in the Turkish economy. Okay, in the present study, we use the household income survey, which was done by the Turkstats, and also it covers the 2014 to 2017, 14 to 2017. The data set is micro-level survey and has individual and household level dimensions. Therefore, the panel data set has approximately 48 months of observations for 1,032 individuals of course, the panel data set is unbalanced because which is based on the individuals on household level, and for some individuals, there is some missing information in our data sets. And total individual time observation is 14,124 observations. And in this data set, an individual has at least 12 months of observation in the survey. Therefore, we can define that the survey is extensively rich and unique to examine the school-to-work transition in a developing economy. Okay,
Ömer,
so,
I'm sorry, you have 5 minutes, so please, yeah.
In this case, I need to skip these slides. Okay, and okay, our first model, main model, shows that the estimation results show that the industrial production has significant and positive effect on the probability of the completion of the school-to-work transition for each individual. Here you see the random effects logit models coefficient, and another one is the population average logit model, which is used as a robustness check because which is recommended by some colleagues in the literature. And also we look at the effects of credit expansion periods on the school-to-work transition because the credit expansion periods can have the potential to generate macroeconomic fragilities in the economy, and the credit expansion periods are the source of the boom periods. We measure the credit expansion periods as a standard deviation of the total credits given to the private sector. A standard deviation of the rolling 12 months moving a standard deviation. We use the I need to correct this because 12 months moving standard deviation of total credit is given to private sector. When the rolling standard deviation is greater than its average, we define that this period is the credit expansion period. Here is the model results for the credit expansion periods, and this coefficient shows the effects of credit expansion periods on the school-to-work transition. The estimations show that the credit expansion periods have significant negative effect because we present odds rates here. Okay, when the odds rate is lower than 1, we see that there is a negative effect between the credit expansion period and the school-to-work transition. We also look at the school-to-work transition to white collar, blue collar, or agricultural occupations. We use ISCO 98 classifications for the occupational categories. And university graduates mainly get the first job as a professional white collar job, while the other graduates get their first job as service workers and shops and market sales jobs. Here is in this graph, here is the graph of those findings. In this graph, the employment of white collar or blue collar jobs of high school, associate degree, and undergraduate graduates can be seen according to these categories. Here you see other graduates here, and here in this graph you see vocational school, faculty, master, and PhD graduates, occupational categories for their first job. And we also estimate wage differentials to school-to-work transition. We use fixed effects panel OLS estimation. Since the female dummy is omitted in such regression, we estimate the main equation for the sample first, and then an estimate for male and female individuals separately. Here, RSCI, real sector confidence index, industrial production, real exchange rate, and interest rate. Those coefficients show our hypothesis, shows the variables of our hypothesis. The estimation results show that the macroeconomic variables have significant effect on the real wage of an individual who complete the school-to-work transition. Here, you see the real exchange rates and industrial production rates effects on the school-to-work transition is statistically significant here. Also, we look to macroeconomic.
Ömer, it's 1 minute.
Oh,
sorry.
I need to wrap up, but Okay, we see also boom periods have positive effect on the wage of an individual who gets the first job after graduation. There is also a positive effect on wage, according to our estimation results. We lastly estimate Weibull model. The model shows that university graduates find it harder than the other graduates to get a job after graduation. In addition, the hazard rate of female graduates is statistically insignificant as the age variable, vocational high school and high school graduates. The expansion period increases the hazard rate to get a job right after the graduation in the current term. Here is the graphical representation of our findings from the Weibull regression. Here, the bold line shows the effects of boom periods on the school-to-work transition, the completion of school-to-work transition for young graduates, for a young graduate, and another dashed line shows the effects of bust periods on the school-to-work transition in the Turkish economy. As a conclusion, we examine the link between school-to-work transition and macroeconomic indicators by using a novel data set. And also, we find that macroeconomic conditions have a statistically significant effect on the school-to-work transition in the Turkish economy. In the Turkish economy context, the macroeconomic conditions cannot be neglected if one wants to understand the hardship that young people experience in that difficult period, which is the school-to-work transition for them. Also, the macroeconomic conditions have an important effect on entry wage for young graduates. And also we find that the boom periods have a positive effects on wage and they have negative effects on failure to complete the school-to-work transition. We also find that credit expansion periods have negative effect on the school-to-work transition. And lastly, most of young employees will find their job after the completion of their school-to-work transition process is employed at the white-collar job for university graduates and blue-collar service-related job for the other school graduates. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Ömer. Could you please exit screen sharing so we can see each other better? Okay, thank you very much. I don't see questions in the chat, so if you could please just unmute your mic and go ahead with your questions.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please, Almas.
Okay, thank you for your very interesting presentation. My question is, Turkey, like all other countries, it has regional variation and dependency on specific industries. And that influences basically school to work transition. Mm-hmm. Did you control for regional heterogeneity? Because Turkey is a very big country and it can have it can be a strong factor.
Okay, thank you. This was also the suggestion of Olena during the progress meeting. And I try to use the regional unemployment rate as a robustness check, but the problem is that the data set has no information about the regional residency of individuals. Therefore, I cannot control the regional effects or unobservable regional things in my in our estimations.
Okay.
I have a question.
Sorry, we have a question from Leslie, but she must have left. But she asks, there may be more students entering the job market in boom periods, so your estimates may underestimate the impact. And she's also concerned about the short time period. How much diversity is there over this time period?
We have to use the time span because the Turkstat data set is limited in these periods. And also this data set is also yearly basis, but we convert monthly basis because the data set has some questions about monthly unemployment and studentships questions. And therefore, we are also concerning about the time period, but we extend the time horizon of this data set because of that.
Okay. Can I ask, because my question is sort of related to that. I mean, isn't it like students go to the job, well, students, graduates, like when you graduate, so there is like a bunch in the, you know, when they become available to look for a job, right? So do you control for that? Because you put the monthly data to the months when the person was unemployed or employed, you know, the labor market status, right? But is there some sort of control how long a period it is from the graduation, or for those effects around the graduation time? I don't know if that's happening like that, or there is more spread graduation.
Actually, I skipped some slides in my presentation because because of that difference dynamic model. In this dynamic model, we select the individuals for each month. Let's say he or she is unemployed at time T and employed at I. When we subtract time T and post employment level, we model the dynamic school to work transition period for each individual. Because of that, we use monthly information for each individual. I hope I answer your question.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah,
yeah, please, Jin.
Sorry. Yeah, so actually, could you review that slide where you define the outcome variable and the list of controls you used? So you skipped that part, but I think that was important. Yeah, information there. So yeah, I wanted to ask some of the controls, but I think it would be useful for you to review that first.
Mm-hmm.
Could you actually go over that right now?
Okay. I think sure. Sorry. I think you're asking this, right? The main model.
Yeah.
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 I have to skip these slides because of my time constraint. But here we use the binary variable if the duration of school to work transition is complete for young variable at time T, otherwise 0. And also we have some control variable, which may affect school to work transition for each individual. Here you see the control variable female, high school graduate and vocational high school graduate, dummies, and also vocational school of higher education graduate and more. And we also try to control the monthly unobservable effects in our model.
How about the age of the individual? Do you have that too?
The age.
Yeah, you said you have people at different ages, and I'm wondering if it starts from the moment they finish school, then people, and if it's like say vocational school or college or whatever, but if those are start at different ages, then they could be different people with different skill sets and other characteristics that also determine their wages. So it could be a confounder.
Okay. Yeah, we will add the age as a covariate, but we do not add the age variable as a control variable because we have a very younger panel here, a very younger data set for individuals. Here is the maximum age is about 39. And also we will add as a robustness check. Thank you for your suggestion.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other questions?
Yeah,
well, I think
I can't see because I can't see everyone.
Could I just? Sorry, I don't know who I interrupted. Sorry, whoever it was.
Please.
Yeah, sorry, I just have a very simple question. What's your, I mean, is there a policy recommendation from this thing? I mean, the way I understand this is that you're saying that for the best thing for schools to work transition is that the economies should not go into a recession.
There is a hard question, I think, tough question, but maybe the government tries to think about some incentives for young graduates for getting a first job after the graduation. Maybe the government gets a period between their graduation and the finding first job. Maybe the government tries to design maybe a new incentive plan for that.
Yeah, so that's what kind of I was getting to, because what you do is your paper is you are controlling for all these things, which are really kind of macroeconomic variables, which is showing if there's boom, then the transition is quick. If it is bust, so to speak, the transition is not quick. So in essence, the government should make every effort or take every step to make sure that we stay in boom period, and that would be the best thing for school to work transition. So, I mean, in a way, from your paper, what you just said, you can't kind of disentangle that element of it. It might be an interesting thing to. I mean, I'm not suggesting for this paper particularly, but I mean, more interesting would be to look at what are the incentives, what kind of things help, other than these macro things that could be out of control from the government's hands, and in some cases like COVID or whatever, the 2008-9 recession. So
thank you for your suggestion. I will consider your suggestion to improve the article in the further steps, but I will think we will think about the policy recommendation according to our results.
Thank you. Francesca, did you want to say something?
Yes, I wanted to say something maybe on both presentations. Well, first, this one is interesting, it's exploratory. I think that also on the last question by Matlub, I totally agree. I think maybe in the Western literature or advanced countries, it's normal that we focus more on microeconomic factors, but probably I think that in the research question of Ömer, there is a different view which comes from developing countries, whereas the economy is much more unstable, much more risky. Everything is very unstable. So he's trying to catch in some way how this is impacting on the life of individuals. I think this is an effort that is interesting. I consider the analysis exploratory because the data is there are very few observations for the country, which is big. 100 million people cannot be represented by 1,000, but still it gives you some sense of the fact that these young people in developing countries, especially in MENA region, are living like a boat in the ocean. So that's the impression that we get out of this paper. And I think that the policy implication may be that we should not think of solving the problem of school to work transition by increasing simply the flexibility in the labor market or by simply implementing active labor market policy alone, because this kind of policies may be less effective in countries where the macroeconomic situation is like that. It's also, if we like, a policy lesson for Europe, whereas the youth guarantee is not working very well also in the south of Europe, and exactly for the same reasons that Ömer is pointing out. So I think this is the worth of this study, the value of this study, that is trying to give maybe a different view of what we typically have about the school to work transition in Western economies. And also I want to spend a few words on Zhiling work, which is very well done. It's an excellent work based on very good data and in-depth analysis. So I had no questions to make before, because we discussed several aspects of the paper, and really it's very well taught. all of it, and it's very good paper, very good results.
Thank you very much, Francesca. I'm afraid I would have to cut the questions at this nice note by Francesca, because we are running out of time. If you have any further questions, you can contact Zhiling and Ömer. Their contacts are on the GLO VirtYS webpage. And thank you very much for joining this last GLO VirtYS webinar for this year. Great thanks to Zhiling and Ömer for sharing their work with us. I wanted to make an announcement that we are currently finalizing the selection for the second cohort of GLO VirtYS scholars, and can now say definitely, because we have really strong candidates. So please mark your calendar for next autumn for the webinars about in a year's time. So thank you very much for finding time to join us, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.